in big, beautiful letters, write the word properties down. In math, you do a lot of things at different times, and you have absolutely no reason why it works. For example, Eli told me that the reason why factors and add-ins are the same is that you can flip them around in any order. But you can't do, you can only do that with addition and multiplication. You can't do that with subtraction. You know, I know that 6 plus 5 is the same thing as 5 plus 6. I get 11 with both of those. But 6 minus 5 is not the same as 5 minus 6, so I can't do it. It doesn't work for everything, so that's why we call these certain properties that we have. Okay, and this first property, let me get rid of this. The first property that says that you can switch things around, that 6 plus 5 is the same thing as 5 plus 6. We have a special name for that. Anybody remember what that name is? That hasn't been looking at the book. You actually remember all this, Peter?
Commutative property?
Yes, the commutative property. Okay, the commutative, I used to call it the commutative, I just like to say it better that way. Okay, that means you can change the order. And it's important that you see that, because a lot of people get that confused with the next property that we talk about. The 6 and the 5 have actually moved. They have changed. Just like maybe your parents commute to work, that's what commute means. Move, go somewhere besides working at home. If you work at home, you don't commute. You commuted to school today. Okay, these have actually moved, just like in multiplication, 6 times 9 is the same thing as 9 times 6. That's the commutative property. Another property we have is called the associative property. Okay, and in that one, it looks like this. 5 plus 4 plus 3, 5 plus 4 plus 3. When you see the associative property, the first thing that you'll notice is that you can't have the associative property without parentheses. There has to be parentheses. Okay. The second thing is the order doesn't change. The order is the same. Okay. I have a 5, a 4, and a 3. I have a 5, a 4, and a 3. They're in the same order. The only thing that moves is the parentheses. They go to a different spot, which means I associate, the ones I put together are different. And the associative property means you can group them different by using these parentheses. What is 5 plus 4? 9 plus 3 is 12. Does that work over here? Sure. 5 plus 7 is also 12. And the associative property works for, that is why when you have a problem that looks like this, 6 times 8 times 5, oh, maybe I should do it like this. How about this? 8 times 6 times 5. Let's do that. If you were doing that problem, which ones would you multiply first? Gary? Right. And because of the associative property, I can associate these, even though they come in a different, even though they're listed like this, because of the associative property with multiplication, I can say, okay, 6 times 5 is 30, and then 30 times 8 is 240. Okay? Notice I didn't change the order of the numbers, I just changed which ones I put together. Now you could have used the commutative property too and moved them, but sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. This also works with multiplication. It doesn't work, no subtraction or division, no subtraction or division. You can't do that with subtraction or division. So want to see an example? I know you do. Let's take a look. What if I have 8 minus 2 plus 3. You know that the answer to that should be what? I can't, this does not equal this. Why? Because 8 minus 2 is 6, 6 plus 3 is 9. But over here, if I do 2 plus 3, I get 5. 8 minus 5 is 3. You can't do it and get the same answer. So the associative property does not work with subtraction. If there's a subtraction or a division in the problem, you can't do that. Feel free to ooh and or ah at any point during this presentation. Love it. A couple more properties that I ran out of room is the identity property. Identity. And there's identity property of multiplication and one of addition as well. And by identity, when you see that word means you get what you started with or you get the same thing. So in other words, let's start with addition. The identity property of addition says, what do I have to add to something to get the same thing all the time? What are you adding to get the same thing? 5 plus what number is going to give me 5? Hard one, I know. It's tough, Christine.
0.
0. Okay, that's the identity property of addition. Now that's not the same as the identity property of multiplication because if you think about 5 times what number gives me 5, it's not 0. The identity property says you multiply by, Michael,
1.
yeah, 1. So by 0 it's addition, by 1 it is multiplication. And some of this is a little hokey, I understand. I mean, if you're slightly dazed and confused, don't let this bother you, because this is not a mathematics deal breaker. Okay, your life won't be severely altered if you don't quite get the gist of it. It's one of those things you just get used to talking to eventually. Or it's one of those things that we'll talk about now and they probably won't talk about again for a long, long time. Yeah?
Does that say identity of multiplication? Yes.
It does, in my scribbling handwriting. And the last one is just the 0 property of multiplication. These all are properties, by the way. 0 prop of multiplication. You can probably guess what that is. 6 times 0. What would the 0 property of multiplication just say? And you've done this since you started multiplying. It's probably the best and simplest rule. When you learned your multiplication tables, you always wanted to do multiplying by 0 because it's probably the easiest thing to learn. Because, Kelsey, when you multiply by 0, you get
0.
Yeah. 0 property of multiplying just says that when you multiply by 0, you get 0. There's a million, I knew it. And that's a wonderful thing because you know what? It doesn't matter what I'm multiplying by 0, I get 0. If I multiply the letter A by 0, I get 0. If I multiply 5,261 by 0, I get 0. If I multiply, and the book sometimes likes to trick you in this. They'll do this, they'll go, oh, let's have them multiply 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 times 0. And you look at that and you go, oh, I don't want to multiply all this together. So you start multiplying 9 times 8, multiply by 7, multiply by. Do you need to multiply all that together? No, because the last thing you're going to multiply by is going to be by 0, so you know the answer is going to be 0. No point in multiplying. I would start by multiplying by this end by 0. 0 times 1 is 0. Oh, 0 times 0, 2 is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. And so they like to trick you. They like to do that to you, Christine.
So when we do that, we have to show that.
No, you would write the problem down and just go 0. Our I would say I'd even let you write that down to 0, because, you could, ooh. Boy, they really throw a lot of stuff into here. Let's go back to subtraction, by the way. Let's stop this thing here. Jane, stop this crazy.